All right, everybody, before you fill out your bracket, there's a lot of information and trends for March that people may not be aware of. David, you look at this stuff all the time. You're a little bit insane. Definitely, probably the most knowledgeable person I know about these weird statistics as we go into March. So, what do you got for us?
Yeah, hey Caleb, feel free to be my guinea pig here with me here. And this is going to be a crazy little breakdown. But yeah, everybody kind of grabs their bracket right after it comes out and just starts feeling it out off a gut feeling or whatever. I used to have a buddy who basically picked no upsets. This is the truth. He picked no upsets for the entire first round of the tournament. Needless to say, did not go to plan. But Caleb, what's your method kind of for filling out the bracket?
Yeah, so I look at it when it comes out. I always like to consider the matchups, especially in those seedings that are traditionally have more upsets, and then look at the teams and some of their key players, things like that, and go from there. But in the past, 2 years ago, I got my wife into it, and she just went through, and I told her the names, and she picked them, and she got like 98% of the brackets. So I don't know if my method's the best in the world either. So.
And you know what? That's what part of the madness is that like you really need logic in March because this is madness. It's in the name. But yeah, I totally agree with you. There's a lot of things out there that would make more sense if normally, but I've seen people pick based off of mascot names they like better and things like that, but it tends to work. But for me, once I get done filling out my bracket on gut, I throw it away. And I do it right the next time around. Now, this is how I do it, and in no way do I promise a perfect bracket for anyone out there. But I've taken a lot of advice from Vegas gamblers and trying to figure out how to do this and studying their methods for doing picks. And I do decent in my bracket. So the first thing I do is I look at the trends of the tournament. There are 9 trends that have a long history in this tournament. And the first one is probably the one everyone is the most familiar with. Caleb, you were just talking about it, the traditional upsets. In the history of this tournament, we've only had 2 number 1 seeds that have been upset in the first round. The number 1 seeds are 150-2 all time against the 16 seeds. Most notably, the first time it happened was when Virginia was upset by UMBC. The second time it happened was last year when FDU beat Purdue. But Caleb, do you know what the most interesting thing about that first time upset when it happened?
I don't. Can you tell me, David?
Yeah, Virginia came back the next season and won the national championship. Purdue is looking to do the same thing this year. So after they were upset by a 16 seed the next following year, Virginia became national champions. Let's see what Purdue can do here. Second, a 15 seed has beaten a 2 seed the last 3 years in a row since 2021. Oral Roberts beat Ohio State. 2022, St. Peter's beats Kentucky. I'm sorry about the trauma, Kentucky fans who are watching. And in 2023, Princeton did in fact beat Arizona. So far, none of those teams who were upset have made it back to the Sweet 16. That's what's even more interesting. And 5 of the last 7 2 seeds who were upset in the first round have yet to return to the Sweet 16. Duke and Michigan State are the only schools who have made it back in the last 12 years. So we'll see which way Arizona goes this season. The third trend I look at is that this one's actually kind of weird for people. The 7 seed traditionally beats the 10 seed a little bit more often than you think. It's actually a lopsided series. The number 7 seed beats the 10 seed at 60.8%, whereas the 9 seeds are the one who normally beats the 8s, which is also just a strange one to think about when you're seeding this bracket out. And this one, of course, is pretty famous at this point. The 12 seed has a habit of upsetting a 5. That's the most popular one. Caleb, last year we had no 5s get upset by a 12, but what are you thinking about this year? More or less likely to pick a 12 this season?
I'm gonna go with more likely.
I feel more likely as well, and there's a lot of good 12 seats this year. All right, so let's get into the stuff that helps us kind of pick a champion. Defense matters in March. Since 2012, only 3 Final Four teams have ranked outside the top 40 in defensive efficiency on KenPom. The last team to do that was Miami last season. They ranked at 99th. Duke this year, or Duke the year before that in 2022, was also one of those teams who were outside the top 40, and then UCLA the year before in 2021. So it seems to be a trend that it's happening more often, but out of all those 3 teams, they lost their first game in the Final Four. Now, this one, I don't know how many people are familiar with. I know I've talked about it on the show, but the AP poll is useless. But there is one thing about the AP poll. A top 12 team in the week 6 AP poll has won the tournament since 2004. Last team who fell outside of that trend was 2003 Syracuse Orange, who ranked completely outside of the top 25 coming into that point. And that was, of course, Carmelo Anthony's team. And that team was very, very good. And Carmelo Anthony, of course, having one of the best all-time college seasons. But the reason I feel like this trend works out so much, it's right after the MTEs, and we're starting to see the teams that gelled the fastest in the earliest portion of the season and then took on great competition and showed some promise at that point. It kind of goes hand in hand with the one that Jimmy Dykes likes to talk about, the MTE champions, often or not the national champion who won an MTE. So also another trend I've been talking about a lot this season, the number of McDonald's All-Americans in the Final Four has been dropping since 2015. I believe we have hit an all-time low last season. Then again, also, don't normally pick 5 seeds for your national champion. 5 seeds is the only seed to never win the NCAA tournament. I believe that's because they sit in a terrible spot in the bracket. They normally get a tough mid-major in the first round. Then they face a top 16 seed in the second round. And it's just tough to make it to the Sweet 16 from that spot. And then you're facing a number 1 seed pretty much immediately after that. It's a horrible, horrible spot to get through. And it's rough. So 10 of the last 13 national champions were in ESPN's BPI top 4. Those include the teams that were outside of that were 2022 Kansas, 2014 UConn, and 2011 UConn. So out of all those trends, what does Vegas tell us to pick? They're looking for 2 of the top 3 scorers to be seniors or juniors. That goes in line with the McDonald's All-Americans trend. Rank the top 5. They want a team that's ranked top 5 in ESPN's BPI. They want a team that hits 36% of their threes, or at least ranked top 15 from 3-point percentage. This one is big because the number is random, but most of our national championships have shot an above average 3-point shooting. And then those teams that rank in the top 25 in KenPom adjusted defensive efficiency. And then also proven coaching seems to be a trend that seems to be more consistent. That matches a lot of the trends that matches a lot of the trends we've covered. Let's take the Week 6 18 poll and break it down. So, Caleb, out of those teams, we've got a pretty decent field. I'm going to look at this again because it's changed since the bracket changed up and everything. But out of all those teams who were in that field, just Oklahoma was the only team not to make the tournament. So immediately eliminate Oklahoma from this mess. I don't think that's a surprise to you that I'm not choosing Oklahoma as a national champion because of that. But let's go ahead and just eliminate all the defenses that are not in the top 40 in KenPom. So that eliminates Gonzaga and that eliminates Baylor. So let's eliminate all the teams that aren't either in the top 75 in 3-point shooting or they don't shoot 36% or better behind the arc. So that's no Kansas, no Houston, no Marquette, no North Carolina, and no Tennessee. So let's take a look at the BPI, and that would eliminate Creighton at this point. I'm going to double check that because they just updated the BPI, and I'm going to make sure that that's consistent right now with what the top 5 looks like. And yeah, out of the top 5, we are left with a handful of teams. We are left with UConn, who's sitting at number 2 in the BPI, Purdue, who's sitting at number 3, and Arizona, who's sitting at number 5. That fits the Vegas trend, or the Vegas pick out of this scenario. So out of all that, how do we pick one? And yeah, I think these are all good teams. I think you could pick any of them. I think they're solid. But let's see if we can't take it a step further and look at 2 of the 3 top scorers being seniors or juniors. That's a Vegas suggestion. For Arizona, you got 2 seniors leading the way in Love and Ballo. For Purdue, you got 2 seniors leading the way in Zach Edey and Lance Jones. For UConn, you got Newton and Caravan, both grad students, upperclassmen, no break there. And then all 3 of these teams were in the top 25 adjusted defenses. And let's go to coaching. I think this is where we get to eliminate somebody. I think Tommy Lloyd is your weakest coach's candidate out of those 3, 2-2 all time in the tournament, a little bit unproven in March. Dan Hurley just won a national championship, but he has had less games in the NCAA tournament than Painter. It's tough between these 2. Earlier this year, Candid Coaches voted Painter as the best coach not to make a Final Four yet. So I'm going to try to find one more trend here to pick a champion. Now, this is tough because there hasn't been a team to repeat as national champions since 2007. So if you like that streak to continue, then you like Purdue. If you don't, you go UConn. And UConn is a team that traditionally likes to break these trends. They're fitting in a lot of those gaps there. Caleb, what do you think, Purdue or UConn?
I think when you look at it and break it down, to me, it's really hard to not pick UConn with how complete of a team they are and how well they've been playing all season. And like you said, it kind of goes against that mold since 2007. No other team since Florida has done that, but I think we might see that trend break this year with UConn going back-to-back champs.
I do like Dan Hurley. I do like the coaching. It's an interesting pick here to go for a repeat champion for the first time. But like we'll see. UConn looks promising, but I think any of those three teams that I mentioned, Arizona, Purdue, or UConn, are a solid pick, really. And I have a list of teams here that I like based on different reasons. All three of those teams are in my platinum picks. They make the most logical sense if you like trends picking a champion. My gold picks, as they're standing right now, are Kansas, Tennessee, North Carolina, and Houston. I think there's some arguments that can be had, but they check a lot of the boxes that you're looking for. Kansas is probably the most shaky one of those, but they check a lot of boxes. To me, it'll come down to their health in March Madness if they're going to have a chance. Now, that's 7 teams right there. All 7 of those teams feel like to me they have the capability of making the Elite Eight. They have that capability. And then I got my silver picks, and that comes down to Baylor, Creighton, Iowa State, and then I changed one up today. So when I come down here on my most recent one, so for my silver picks, I've got Creighton, Iowa State, Marquette, Baylor, and then brand new up here, because Auburn jumped in to the top 5 of the BPI and they finally have some quad 1 games. Auburn looks a lot more promising than they did. So they're starting to check a lot of boxes that previous national champions have had. This is a few box check is really my silver tier. I think this is a good group of teams. These all feel like Sweet 16 with the potential to make the Elite Eight is really the way that I feel about these teams. And then my bronze picks. These are things that I don't think they're likely to make a run, but they could make the Sweet 16. They could do whatever. Most of these teams have high ceilings and low floors. So I'm looking at this group. I've got Texas, I've got Kentucky, I've got Alabama, I got Illinois, I got Duke, I got BYU. Those to me are all interesting teams to be taking a look at here. But yeah, those are my 18 teams I'm taking a look at. All of them have a legit chance to make the Sweet 16, but for 2 of them, it's not going to happen. So, that's just math here. And the bracket has a way of, sorting that thing out most of the time. So, guys, what do you think? Am I crazy?
I mean, I think those are all solid options, David, but it is March Madness. So, upsets, Cinderella stories. Let's get into it with Isaac and take a look at those mid-major options.
And we welcome to the show Mr. Isaac Bourne of Mid-Major Madness. He is, of course, sitting right now at the American Conference Championship in Fort Worth, Texas, where the UAB Blazers just took down the Temple Owls, one of the more surprising stories that we've had in all the chaos over the last 48 hours with all the conference tournaments. I'm telling you right now, the conference tournaments, if this is the precursor to what this tournament's going to be, it's going to be a nuts week. But Isaac, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing good. Excited to talk about this bracket. I've been waiting for this all year, and it's finally out. It's like Christmas for me.
Well, you seem like the perfect guy for us to ask, who do you like as somebody to upset this field, drive everybody crazy, and, bust 97% of brackets in this thing? What team are you circling to cause the most damage there out of the mid-major ranks?
Well, I mean, there are a lot of teams in here that you could consider as these bracket busters, because you've got teams like Grand Canyon and McNeese, who started off the year really hot. McNeese finished off the year really hot with the Southland Tournament Championship, and I guess you could say the same with Grand Canyon winning the WAC just a minute ago, or just yet last night. I mean, but I mean, you've got a bunch of these like lower seeded mid majors, or like not lower seeded in the 11 seeds and the 12 seeds, and those guys can really win. But if you're looking at like 15 and 14 seeds, I really like Morehead State as a big matchup for Illinois, just because they're very well coached with Preston Spradlin, and they also bring in Riley Minix, who, when in my times watching Riley Minix, I've never seen him have a hard matchup. So
Yeah, no, for sure. Trust me, all those teams you just named are teams that have definitely been on my radar all season. At least Morehead State definitely popped on my radar after they won the Ohio Valley. Very good team there. Isaac, the most popular seed line when we see someone's bracket being bust of the last couple of years. Last year we didn't have one, but a 12 was beating a 5 on a regular basis. What 12 seed are you the most interested in? I got one in my head. James Madison obviously was a really good team to start the year.
Everybody says James Madison, and yes, that's a very good team. But one team that I just talked about them. One team I want to raise is Grand Canyon. Grand Canyon is a team. They beat San Diego State earlier in the year. They did fall off a little bit in WAC play, losing I think it was 3 in a row against Seattle and some other teams in Tarleton State. But they're a team that can compete with Power 5 competition and have shown that this year with that San Diego State win, plus just the WAC dominance that they've had.
Okay. So other than that, is there anybody that you think might not be as popular, so to speak, out of the more popular teams that have been picked that you're interested in?
Well, I'm looking over the bracket here, and first of all, I've got to mention St. Peter's. I know that every year, or we're just a couple years removed from their Cinderella run. They beat my Kentucky Wildcats, and we're just a couple years removed from that, and it was just a great team. But one team that I really see as a team that probably should have been a little bit higher, but didn't, is coming out of Conference USA, Western Kentucky. And that might be my Kentucky bias showing, but Western Kentucky plays fast. They play on their Ken Palm rated is the fastest paced team in the country. They score very quickly, and so they can be a problem for this Marquette team if they can play into the rhythm of their offense.
Yeah, so one of the big ones that I picked in our kind of mid-major of going over conference champs was UAB. Obviously kind of a little bit of an upset there, them winning that conference. And, I feel like they have a solid matchup starting out against San Diego State, a team that a lot of people weren't sure where they were going to land. So what are your thoughts on that team, knowing that a lot of people kind of undervalued them?
Well, San Diego State is a team that you saw that last year, them going all the way to the national championship. They're a team that can get hot, and you've seen they brought back Lamont Butler, Darion Trammell, guys like that who and also Jaden Ledee, totally forgot about him, who's up for National Player of the Year now. San Diego State's got a bunch of good players, but then you also look at UAB, who I literally just watched come off the court, and with Yaxel Lendenborg and Eric Gaines. Lendenborg has come out of nowhere as a JUCO product, but he plays with Power 5 skill, and you see that in his ability to stretch the floor and his ability to run the court at 6'9". And then you've got Eric Gaines, who, while not maybe a perfect point guard for this team, is one of the best scorers in the American Conference. And when he gets hot, he gets hot. And then I would be remiss without even talking about Vasquez, who today dropped 29 points in the American Conference final. And this team is dangerous, and I would be very scared if I was San Diego State. But at the same time, it'll be a really good matchup between Ledee and Lendenborg in the front court.
Okay, so you mentioned Western Kentucky, and we know over the last couple of seasons, I believe it's 3 seasons in a row now, 15 is upset at 2. One of the teams that I circled and I'm more interested in is South Dakota State. Now, I don't believe they've won an NCAA tournament game before. I may be mistaken. They might have won one, but it's been a minute since they have. They were picked, I believe, 2 years ago pretty heavily to beat Providence. With South Dakota State playing Iowa State, do you see any hope for the Jackrabbits? Because this is a team that's been consistently getting to the tournament out of the Summit. Do you think there's any chance that might be the 15 over the 2 this year?
Well, it's March, so that's all I can say. You never know what can happen. My takes have gone from bad to worse as the month goes on. I predicted that Temple would get knocked out in the first round of the American, and here we are. So, but my take here, unfortunately, is that I don't think South Dakota State can quite compete with Iowa State, seeing as they're very hot right now, just coming off success in the Big 10, the Big 12 championship. And so you've got a good Iowa State team that's peaking at the right time. And then South Dakota State, who, yes, they're a great team, is just not one of the premier mid-majors in my head. But like I said, it's still 50-50 in my head just because of the March craziness that goes on.
Certainly. I'm going to ask you one more in that corner of the region. I'm going to hand it over to Maddie for the final question. But there's the Missouri Valley situation. Obviously, Indiana State got left out of this thing. I want to ask this question in two parts. How unfortunate is it for Indiana State? You think it was a crime against humanity that Indiana State was left out? And then for the Drake Bulldogs, what are the odds of them making a run in this thing?
Well, last weekend I was in attendance to see at the Missouri Valley Conference Championship to see Drake take down Indiana State. And the press conference room afterwards with Indiana State coach Schertz was he was definitely upset, and both him and then later on in the interview sessions, Coach DeVries were both very adamant that that the MVC was a two-bid league. Unfortunately, with recent events and we've seen so many bid stealers, Indiana State just barely knocks it out. Now, I did hear that they have the highest net rating of any team out of the field, which is incredible to me. But with they're the third team out, I don't think it's very unfortunate. I thought if you were going to look at my personal opinion, I think that with I thought that they would get in just with Avila and his just rise to prominence, but they will be a dangerous NIT team. I'll say that.
Certainly. Maddie?
So everybody's always looking for the upset of all upsets. So out of these picks for the 116 seeding, who do you think has the best chance of?
Don't make a prediction that a 16 is going to beat a 1. That's only
No,
happened.
no, just who has the best chance. I don't want to put that on anybody, but if somebody was going to pick it, going to bet all their money on that, which one would you go with?
As far as the play-in teams, unfortunately, I don't really see too many of these teams as upset teams. They don't play. One thing you're looking for in upset teams is teams that play fast, shoot the three really well, and when they get hot, they can go on big runs and win games. And these teams that I'm looking at aren't those types of teams. But if you're looking at the teams that are automatically in, which are Longwood and Stetson, I'm looking at both of these teams. Obviously, I don't think Stetson can beat UConn because I don't think anyone can beat UConn. But I raised you Longwood, who came out of they came out of conference tournament, with High Point in it and teams like that who were just incredibly talented. And Longwood comes out of that very strong conference. And I'm kind of selfishly hoping that it's Longwood because it's in Memphis and that's where I'll be, and it'll be a really good way to really good thing to cover. But Longwood started off very hot this season. Toned down a little bit once they got to conference play, but they seem like the perfect candidate to be that knockout team, especially with a Houston team that, just lost in the Big 12 semis.
Okay, so with Longwood, their coach, you do know his backstory, what team he was a part of when he was a 16 seed, right? Their coach
I'm not quite sure I do.
Their coach at Longwood was part of the UMBC staff that upset Virginia as an assistant coach. I cannot remember his name right now, but he was on that staff for UMBC. So I'm just super. That's why I started pointing as soon as you said Longwood. I'm going to have to look up the coach's name again real fast. Hold on one second. The glory of the internet right here just escaped my head, but that's one of those facts that have stayed in my head for forever. While I'm looking it up, wanted to let everybody know, Isaac, where they can find you at.
Well, my name is Isaac Bourne, as you can see. Isaac Bourne, as you can see, Bourne, like Jason Bourne. And you can find me on Twitter at IsaacBourne11. And then, you can find my articles online at Mid Major Madness. And, go give those a read if you would like. I have a lot of content coming out at this time of year. It's March. We sleep in May, as everyone always says.
Yeah, and the name was, by the way, it was Griff Aldrich is the coach who was part of the UMBC. Yep, he was part of that UMBC team. He was on the coaching staff that upset the Virginia Cavaliers. Isaac, thank you so much for joining us, and I will let you get out of Fort Worth and back home, man.
Thank you all for having me.
Of course.